Hello, Night Seekers, and welcome to Lacuna Noir. This is where forgotten stories and gentle voices meet, carrying you softly into peaceful sleep, wrapped in mystery. Before tonight's stories begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know. And a little note before we begin. You may notice a few brief ads in the first 10 minutes, but after that, the rest of the video is completely ad-free. Just you, the silence, and the stories. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the night carry you. If you're drawn to these quiet, shadowed nights, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a story when darkness calls. I can still remember the sound of my sister humming while our mother tied our father to the pier behind our house. It is strange which memories stay with you. I don't remember what we ate for breakfast that morning. I don't remember what clothes I was wearing or whether the sky was clear when I woke up. I don't even remember what my father said to me before we walked outside, but I remember my sister humming. The tune was soft and steady, almost cheerful. The marsh grass surrounding our property moved in the wind, brushing against itself with a dry whisper. If I listened carefully, it almost sounded like the grass was humming along with her. Our house stood several feet above the marsh on wooden supports. Almost every house that remained in our area had been raised by then. The old ones that hadn't been lifted were either abandoned or already claimed by the water. Behind our house was a long wooden pier. That was where Mom tied Dad down. He lay flat on his back in the center of the pier. 4 ropes stretched from his wrists and ankles to the wooden pylons around him. Mom pulled one of the ropes tight. Dad lifted his head slightly. "Connie, damn it," I said with gusto. "Girl." Mom smiled. She grabbed the rope again and pulled harder. The knot tightened around his wrist. Dad laughed. That's one of the things that seems so strange to me now. Nobody was screaming. Nobody was fighting. Dad wasn't begging us to stop. Mom wasn't crying. My sister wasn't hiding. And I wasn't trying to save him. At the time, none of it seemed unusual. We had prepared for this. We had discussed it. We had practiced. To us, what was happening wasn't murder. It wasn't even death in the way most people think about death. It was an offering, a necessary sacrifice. Mom leaned over Dad to check the rope around his other wrist. Her hair fell forward and brushed across his face. He giggled. "You still teasing and tickling a man straight to the end." Mom slapped him playfully on the chest. "You bad." Then she leaned down again. This time, she kissed him. Not a quick goodbye kiss. A real kiss. The kind of kiss you give someone you've loved for years. I remember watching them and feeling confused even then. There was love between them. Real love. Whatever else you might think about what happened that day, you need to understand that. My mother loved my father. My father loved her. That's what made his sacrifice meaningful. When Mom finally pulled away, she rested her hand against his chest. "Thank you, our king." Dad smiled up at her. "You live," he said. "You find solace in Mother's mercy, in her newfound fruit." Mom didn't cry. She smiled proudly. "We will." Then the tidal clock began to ring. The sound carried across the marsh. Once, twice, 3 times. My stomach tightened. Even though we'd practiced everything, hearing that bell made it real. The tide was coming. Dad turned his head toward my sister and me. "Your fortune cometh, my angels. Live in light." My sister answered first. "Yes, Daddy." I swallowed. "Yes, Pa." Dad took a deep breath. Then he shouted one final command. "Commence." Mom stood. She walked away from him and came back toward us. My sister took my hand. Mom put one arm around me and the other around her. We stood together. Then we began to sway. Left, left, right, exactly as we had practiced. And we sang. Mother, drink from our wine, we're going to let it shine. Mother, drink from our wine, we're going to let it shine. Our voices weren't perfect. My sister sang too high. I kept losing the rhythm. Mom had the strongest voice of the three of us. But perfection didn't matter. Mother Nature wasn't interested in beautiful voices. She wanted sincerity. She wanted gratitude. She wanted acknowledgement. At least, that's what we believed. Then the water began to rise. At first, it was still beneath the pier, about a foot below the wooden planks. I could see the dark water moving between the gaps. Then it rose an inch, then another, then another. The tide was unusually fast that day. Nobody stopped singing. Mother, take this man of swine. He scorched your earth time and time. Please take this man of swine. Dad remained perfectly still. His breathing was calm. He was smiling. The water reached the underside of the pier. Then it spilled across the boards. A thin layer at first. It flowed around Dad's body, around his legs, around his shoulders. My sister squeezed my hand. We continued singing. He scorched your earth time and time. Time and time, time and time. Take this swine. The water rose around Dad's sides. His clothes became soaked. Still, he smiled. I remember looking directly at him. I expected fear to appear eventually. I thought there would be a moment when instinct took over, a moment when belief stopped mattering and the body demanded survival. It never came. The water reached his ears. Then, his cheeks. Dad took one last slow breath. His eyes remained on us. And then the tide covered his face. For a few seconds, I could still see him beneath the surface. His features became distorted by the moving water. Then, the tide became too dark. He disappeared. We kept singing. That was important. You never stopped the hymn before Mother finished accepting the offering. By then, the water had risen to our knees. Mom finally stopped singing. My sister stopped. So did I. None of us spoke. We turned around and trudged through the water toward our raised house. I looked back once. The pier was almost completely underwater. I couldn't see Dad. I don't remember crying. That's another thing that bothers me now. Maybe I did later. Maybe my memory has changed over the years. But I don't remember tears. I remember being hungry. That evening, we ate potatoes and beans. Those were among the few things we could still grow reliably. Much of the soil had become useless. Salt water had ruined large areas where crops once grew. Some plants survived for a while, but each year there seemed to be fewer things we could produce. So we ate what Mother allowed us to grow. Potatoes, beans, sometimes other vegetables if we were lucky. We sat around the table without Dad. Nobody mentioned the empty chair. After dinner, we took turns reading from Mother Nature's hymnal. Mom read first, then my sister, then me. The hymnal taught us that humanity had mistaken patience for forgiveness. For generations, people had poisoned rivers, burned forests, filled the air with smoke, and taken whatever they wanted from the earth. They had been warned. They had ignored those warnings. Now, Mother was correcting the balance. That was what I believed. That was what we all believed. 10 years have passed since we tied my father to that pier. And I miss him. I miss him more now than I did immediately after his death. Maybe that's because I understand death differently now. As a child, I believed Dad had gone willingly to Mother. I believed his life had purchased something for us. Time, protection, mercy, 10 years later, I'm not sure what his death purchased. The water kept rising. The storms became worse. The crops continued dying. Families disappeared. Entire neighborhoods were abandoned. Roads that once connected towns became rivers. Places my mother remembered from childhood now exist beneath several feet of water. And Mother has not been satisfied. We are no closer to appeasing the Queen than we were the day my father died. If you're reading this somewhere dry, you may think I'm lying. Maybe the water hasn't reached you. Maybe when you look outside, everything still seems normal. Your roads are still roads, your fields are still fields, your houses still stand on solid ground. If that's true, I don't envy you. I fear for the eye that has not opened. People always believe disaster is impossible until it arrives at their own door. We did. For years, people around us dismissed the warnings. A little flooding wasn't the end of the world. A bad storm was just a bad storm. A failed crop was unfortunate. Another family moving inland was somebody else's problem. Then the water stopped going back down. That's when belief changed. Some people turned to science. Some turned to governments. Some turned to God. My family turned to her, Mother Nature, the Queen, the giver, the taker, the wounded mother beneath our feet. We believed suffering had meaning. We believed every flood was a punishment. Every storm was a warning. Every failed harvest was another message telling us that humanity had taken too much. And sacrifices were our apology. My father wasn't the first. He wasn't the last either. For years, I believed those sacrifices mattered. Now I'm not sure. This morning, I asked Mom about it. She's older now, much older than I remember Dad ever becoming. Age hasn't weakened her belief. If anything, it has made it stronger. We were sitting near the stern of the boat while my sister slept below deck. I asked, "Do you ever think Pa's sacrifice was for nothing?" Mom looked at me sharply. "What you mean?" The water kept rising. She said nothing. The storms kept coming. Nothing changed. She scoffed. "We still livin', ain't we?" I looked out across the water. There was nothing around us except gray sky and darker water. That doesn't mean his sacrifice saved us. Man has done wrong by her, Mom said. She will take every last one. There was no hesitation in her voice. She believed it as strongly as she had 10 years ago, maybe stronger. I asked her something I'd wondered about for years. Why does she toy with us, though? Mom frowned. What? If she wants us gone, why doesn't she just end it? She didn't answer. Why not create one wave big enough to take everyone? Or fire? One storm, one moment. Why make us suffer slowly? Mom stared at me. I continued. Why let us survive another year just to take more from us the next? She turned away. I do not bother myself with such quandaries, those that provide little salt to our means. That was the end of the conversation. Mom has always been good at ending conversations she doesn't want to have. I didn't push her, but the question hasn't left me. Why slowly? Why take one house and leave the next? Why destroy one family while another survives? Why allow crops to grow just long enough for people to depend on them before killing them? If this is punishment, why isn't it final? I used to think the answer was mercy. Now I'm beginning to wonder if there is an answer at all. That's dangerous thinking in my family. Doubt is considered a form of disrespect, and disrespect toward Mother is what caused all of this, at least according to the hymnal. But I can't stop myself anymore. I keep thinking about Dad. I think about him lying on that pier, smiling, trusting us, trusting her. He genuinely believed his death would help us. What if it didn't? What if my father simply drowned while his wife and children sang beside him? I hate myself for thinking that. Even writing it feels like betrayal. Sometimes I can still hear him. Your fortune cometh, my angels. Live in light. He believed. He wasn't afraid. Maybe that's enough. Maybe the meaning of his sacrifice wasn't whether it stopped the water. Maybe it gave him peace. But peace doesn't feed my sister. Belief doesn't repair an engine. Prayer doesn't make fresh water safe to drink. And hymns don't stop storms. Those are thoughts I would never say aloud around Mom. Not yet. Because whether I believe in Mother or not, I still have responsibilities. My sister is a teenager now. She's changed a lot since the day Dad died. She remembers less of him than I do. Sometimes she'll ask me questions. What was his favorite food? What did he sound like when he laughed? Did he really want to die? I can answer the first two. The third is harder. Yes, he volunteered. Yes, he smiled. Yes, he told us it was necessary. But a person can willingly die for something that isn't true. That's the thought that frightens me. My mother is aging too. Her hands shake more than they used to. Her back hurts. Some mornings she needs help getting up. But her faith hasn't weakened. She still reads from the hymnal every night. Even here. Even on the boat. Especially on the boat. Because we don't live in the raised house anymore. That house is gone. The pier is gone too. The marsh where my sister hummed while Dad waited for the tide is somewhere beneath the water. I don't know exactly where. Sometimes we pass through areas that look familiar, and I wonder whether we're floating directly over our old home. I wonder if Dad's bones are somewhere beneath us. We live on a crab boat now. It isn't comfortable. It isn't supposed to be. Comfort belongs to the old world. The boat smells like salt, fuel, rust, old rope, and whatever food we're cooking. The engine requires constant attention. Fresh water is precious. Food is worse. Potatoes and beans still appear whenever we can get them. Sometimes fish, sometimes crabs, sometimes nothing worth mentioning. My sister complains. Mom reminds her to be grateful. I stay quiet. Someone has to keep the boat moving. That's me now. I'm the captain. I never expected to become one. Dad should have been captain. He knew water better than I ever will. He taught me some things when I was young, but I didn't pay enough attention. Back then, I thought he'd always be there to teach me later. Children always believe there will be a later. Now, I learn through mistakes. I watch the tides. I watch the clouds. I listen to the engine. I check our supplies. I choose where we anchor. I decide when we move. Every choice carries 3 lives. Mine, my sister's, my mother's. That's why doubt frightens me. Belief used to make decisions easy. If Mother commanded something, you obeyed. If the hymnal provided an answer, you followed it. If sacrifice was required, you sacrificed. But now every decision feels heavier. Mom still believes the great rise is coming. Not the gradual flooding we've already seen. The true rise. The final tide. She believes eventually the oceans will climb high enough to wash away everything humanity built. Cities, roads, borders, factories, temples, everything. She says the world will become clean again. My sister doesn't talk about it much. I don't know what she believes. Maybe she's afraid to tell me. Maybe she has the same doubts I do. Sometimes I catch her looking at Mom during the nightly readings. There is something in her expression I recognize. Questions. I haven't asked her about them. Not yet. I don't want to put ideas into her head. And I don't want Mom to believe I'm poisoning her faith. We're all we have left. Whatever happens, I need to keep this family together. That matters more to me than faith now. Maybe that's my sin. If Mother really is watching, perhaps she already knows. Perhaps she hears every doubt. Perhaps the next storm will be meant for me. I don't know. All I know is that I still wake before sunrise every morning. I check the engine. I check our water. I check the horizon. Then I stand behind the wheel and keep us moving. Some mornings, The ocean is strangely beautiful, completely calm. The surface turns silver beneath the rising sun. On those mornings, it's difficult to imagine the water as angry. It doesn't look like a goddess. It doesn't look like punishment. It's just water. Then I remember my father disappearing beneath it. And I don't know what to believe. Maybe Mom is right. Maybe we are alive because of him. Maybe his sacrifice bought us these 10 years. Maybe every day my sister wakes up breathing is another gift purchased with Dad's final breath. Or maybe we've simply been lucky. I don't know which possibility scares me more. Faith gave everything a reason. Doubt gives you nothing but questions. Still, I can't afford to lose myself in those questions. Not yet. My teenage sister needs me. My aging mother needs me. The boat needs someone behind the wheel. So we wait. We travel when we must. We anchor when we can. We ration food. We collect water. We read the hymnal. Mom prays. My sister sometimes hums, and every time she does, I am a child again. Standing on that pier while the marsh grass moves in the wind, I see Dad smiling beneath us. I hear the tidal clock ringing. I hear him shout, "Commence." Then the water rises. It always rises in my memory. An inch, then another, until his face disappears. 10 years later, I still don't know whether my father was a sacrifice, a victim, or both. Maybe one day I'll understand. For now, understanding is a luxury. Survival isn't. The great tide may come tomorrow. It may come 10 years from now. Maybe it will never come. But until the water takes this boat, or my hands can no longer hold the wheel, I will keep my family alive. Whatever Mother wants from us, she will have to wait. I am the captain now. And we will persist. I've never been good with money. Actually, that's putting it mildly. I'm terrible with money. I like to tell myself it isn't completely my fault. I'm part of that generation that did almost everything society told us to do. Go to school, get good grades, go to college, get a degree, find a career, work hard. Then everything will be fine. Instead, I walked away with $69,075 in student debt and entered a job market where technology seemed determined to make me unnecessary. And just in case you're wondering, student debt doesn't magically disappear if you declare bankruptcy. Good to know. I didn't invest in gold when it was cheap. I didn't buy silver. I didn't invest in oil. I didn't put 10% of my monthly income into the S&P 500 back when everything was going up, mostly because I was about 4 years old at the time. Apparently, God personally selected me to be too young to benefit from the dot-com boom and exactly the right age to watch AI slowly make my career questionable. Things were going great. These were the kinds of thoughts going through my head while I searched for an apartment. Eventually, after credit checks, applications, approvals, paperwork, and the humiliating process of asking my parents to co-sign, I found a place I could almost afford. I handed the building manager my deposit. Part of it was a sweaty $100 bill I'd been carrying in my wallet for too long. When I pulled it out, a few coins and pieces of lint fell from my pocket. The building manager watched them hit the floor. I pretended not to notice. The apartment building itself was exactly what you'd expect for my budget. The hallway carpet was a nauseating shade of green. It looked like it had survived several decades of cigarette burns, spilled alcohol, dirty shoes, and things I preferred not to identify. The lights overhead were yellow and weak. The walls had stains that nobody had bothered painting over. I'm pretty sure the official architectural term for the building was shithole. The elevator didn't work. Of course it didn't. My apartment was on the 7th floor. I carried everything I owned upstairs in 3 trips. By the time I finished, my back felt like someone had replaced my spine with broken glass. There were 3 other roommates. That wasn't terrible. One of them even seemed like he might not be a complete sociopath. My bedroom was tiny. I dropped my boxes on the floor, sat down, and pulled out the advertisement I'd ripped from a bulletin board 2 weeks earlier. That's when I noticed something. I'd thought the advertisement said the room was furnished. It didn't. The printer had left a dark splatter near the word, making unfurnished look like furnished. I stared at it for a long time. Then I looked around my bedroom. Boxes, clothes, a few random possessions scattered across the floor. No bed. No furniture. Nothing. There was also the smell of freshly placed rat poison coming from somewhere nearby. Perfect. The next morning, with my back still screaming from sleeping on the floor, I walked to Joe's Mattress Acropolis on 35th and Fitz. The automatic doors opened with a mechanical whir. Inside were mattresses. Lots of mattresses. I realized that's not surprising. Huge yellow signs hung everywhere, promising low, low prices. Apparently, their definition of low was different from mine. A man emerged from the back. I assumed he was Joe. He didn't wear a name tag, but he had the energy of a man who owned a mattress store named after himself. He wore maroon pants and a short-sleeved button-down shirt tucked tightly into them. His stomach hung slightly over his belt. On his head was a toupee that wasn't fooling anyone. "Anything I can help you with?" he asked. He gave me the polished smile of someone who had spent decades convincing exhausted people that mattresses were more complicated than they needed to be. I looked around. Only then did I realize the store was completely empty. No customers, no employees. Just me and Joe standing beneath flickering fluorescent lights. "Yeah," I said, "I need a mattress." "Brilliant," Joe clapped his hands together. "Indeed, I can help you with that, young man." He pointed a finger gun at me. "Say, what kind of sleeper are you?" I stared at him. "Regular? Side sleeper? No, belly sleeper? Back sleeper? Topsy-turvy? Hooded wombat? Perchance?" I blinked. "What was that last one?" He smiled. I shook my head. "Back sleeper, I guess." Aha. Another finger gun. "I thought you had that look about you." Apparently, back sleepers had a recognizable appearance. "Any ailments? Special requirements? Scoliosis?" "I really just need a mattress." That's when I properly looked at the prices. $399, $499, $799. Even the cheapest mattresses seemed to start around $299. My stomach tightened. I had nowhere near that much. I looked back at Joe. "You don't happen to have any used mattresses, do you?" His smile vanished. "We prefer the term pre-owned." He said it with complete seriousness. Then the smile returned. "Of course. Follow me." He led me past fake decorative pillars toward the back of the store. There was a tower of old mattresses stacked against one wall. They were yellowed with age and balanced so badly that I expected the entire pile to collapse. The air smelled like cheap sandalwood air freshener. There was another smell underneath it, something I couldn't identify. Joe adjusted his glasses. "A single starts at $99. The fluorescent light above us flickered. For just a second, I felt something strange. Dread, there was no reason for it. Nothing had happened. But something inside me suddenly wanted to leave. Joe laughed. "Sorry about that. Been meaning to replace that tube." I rubbed my forehead. "Look, man, I've got maybe $60. His smile weakened. "Can you help me out or not?" He studied me. He rubbed his chin. Then something changed in his expression. "I might have just the thing, he turned and walked deeper into the store. I followed. The farther we went, the stronger that strange feeling became. Dread, we entered a narrow hallway with a low ceiling. Then another room. Finally, Joe opened the door to a dusty stockroom. A narrow beam of sunlight entered through a dirty window. Dust floated through it. Joe stopped. "If you can haul it away, you can have it." His voice sounded different. The salesman personality was gone. No smile, no jokes, no finger guns. I looked around. The room appeared empty. The place is empty. I was irritated now. Was he making fun of me because I couldn't afford one of his mattresses? Joe cleared his throat. Then he pointed toward the corner. I looked. There was a mattress, queen size. It was almost hidden in shadow. I walked closer. It was covered in dust, but otherwise it didn't look terrible. No obvious stains, no disgusting smells. I definitely wouldn't have wanted to shine a blacklight on it, but beggars can't be choosers. "Free?" I asked. Joe nodded. "If you can take it." That should have bothered me. It didn't. Free was exactly within my budget. I called my friend Julio. He arrived with his old Toyota Hilux, and together we loaded the mattress into the back between a weed trimmer and half a bag of cement. Before leaving, I thanked Joe. He didn't respond immediately. He just looked at me. There was something in his eyes. Not the salesman anymore. Something else. Concern, maybe, or relief. I didn't think much about it. Julio suggested stopping at a bar. After the first Keystone Light, I forgot about Joe completely. By the time we'd spent most of the $60 I'd saved on the mattress, I was feeling pretty good, like I said. I'm terrible with money. Later, Julio helped me carry the mattress up 7 flights of stairs. Drunk, exhausted, and laughing like idiots, we finally dropped it onto my bedroom floor. A cloud of dust rose from it. Both of us started coughing. I spent about 10 minutes beating as much dust from the mattress as possible. Then Julio left. I lay down. The radiator made its usual steady noise. The alcohol helped. Within minutes, I was falling asleep. Then something changed. The first thing I saw was the sky. Purple, not normal purple. It moved. It seemed to breathe. The entire sky expanded and contracted like the inside of some enormous living lung. There were colors inside it I couldn't properly identify. Purple, blue, pink, something like periwinkle. Then colors that didn't seem to have names. And somehow, without knowing why, I understood something. The sky knew I was there. Then another thought appeared in my mind. It wasn't my voice. "Don't look behind you." I stood beneath the impossible sky. Rings of light moved through it. They folded inward toward a single point. The breathing slowed. I tried to calm myself. This was a dream. Obviously, I'd had too much beer. Dreams could be strange. Dreams could feel real. I looked down. White willow trees surrounded me. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Their branches twisted through an endless field. But they weren't moving because of wind. They were writhing. Then I heard laughter. At first, it was distant, a faint cackling somewhere beyond the trees. I couldn't tell where it came from. The sound was wrong. It seemed to exist in several pitches at once. High, low, whining, deep, like several voices laughing through the same throat. Then I realized the laughter was coming from above. The sky was laughing. Its surface pulsed with every sound. The rings folded inward, again, 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 and suddenly I realized how beautiful it was. The fear disappeared. I started swaying. The white willows moved with me. Left, right, the laughter became comforting. Everything belonged to the sky. That thought felt obvious. Natural, a root curled around my ankle. I didn't care. A branch touched my hand. I held it. We swayed together. My body felt weightless. I could stay here forever. Everything was fine. Everything was beautiful. Then, beneath the happiness, I felt the warning again. Don't look behind you. So naturally, I looked. Something moved between the trees. Fast, I saw antlers. Then nothing. A second movement. Something pale. Maybe a tendon. A leg. A hoof. Then it disappeared into the thicker woods. Suddenly, I understood. The laughter wasn't coming from the sky. It belonged to that thing. And the moment I understood that, the beautiful dream became terrifying. Branches wrapped around me. My arms, my legs, my chest. They tightened. I pulled away. The sky roared. The sound shook the trees. The purple surface began pulsing faster. The willows suddenly became stiff. Afraid whatever controlled them had been distracted. That gave me a chance. I ran. I pushed through the field. Tall grass slapped against my legs. The farther I got from the dense woods, the quieter the laughter became. Its control over my mind weakened. The sky flashed angrily above me. I didn't look up. I kept running. A branch caught my shoulder. Pain sliced across my skin. Then, everything disappeared. I woke in my bedroom covered in sweat. For several seconds, I stared at the ceiling. Then I laughed. What the fuck? That had been one hell of a dream. I showered. The water was barely warm. My entire body hurt. I felt like I hadn't slept at all. But what could I expect from a free mattress? I stepped out of the shower and reached for my towel. Then I saw myself in the mirror. I froze. There was a fresh pink cut across my shoulder, exactly where the branch had hit me. The image returned immediately. White willows. Purple sky. The branch. I touched the cut. Real, I tried to explain it. Maybe I'd scratched myself during the night. Physical sensations can enter dreams. That happens. Your mind takes something happening to your body and builds it into whatever you're dreaming. I looked it up at work. Hypnopompia, waking sleep. That sounded scientific enough to make me feel slightly better. Still, it didn't explain everything. By lunchtime, I'd consumed 3 cups of coffee. By 3 in the afternoon, I could barely keep my eyes open. I had slept worse on the mattress than I had on the floor. When work ended, I could hardly think. My eyelids felt like they had weights attached to them. A homeless man shook a can at me while I walked home. Normally, I might have stopped. That day, I barely noticed him. I reached the apartment, walked into my room, collapsed onto the mattress. I was asleep before my head fully hit it. And then I opened my eyes. Purple sky. My stomach dropped. No, I was back. I had to remember something. I was scared. That mattered. The place wanted me to forget. I refused to look at the sky. Instead, I stared at the white willows. Their branches were moving, slowly, like worms. My shoulders started swaying. No, I stopped myself. Then I noticed something in the grass. A path. My path. The exact route I'd taken the previous night. Grass bent where I'd run through it. Turns, curves, everything that was impossible. Dreams didn't continue like this. I hadn't actually run through this place. It had been a dream. Don't look behind you, the warning returned. Then I heard the laughter. How long had it been there? I looked down. The ground seemed too far away. My heart stopped. The trees had lifted me. Branches supported my body. They carried me upward. And suddenly, it felt good. Warm, comforting, the branches caressed me. The purple sky moved above. Purple, fuchsia, mauve. Beautiful, ready for me. Everything belongs to the sky. I started laughing. The woods laughed with me. The creature laughed too, somewhere behind me, getting closer. A branch twisted around my arm. A little pain. I laughed harder. Another tightened around my leg, then another. My arms were pulled outward, my legs spread apart. The pain increased. I stopped laughing. The branches pulled harder. Pain shot through my joints. Then I heard footsteps, soft, steady, approaching from behind. And I remembered. I was scared. The creatures stepped into view. I wish it hadn't. The smell reached me first. Sweet decay, rotting flesh. The thing was enormous. Even though the branches had lifted me high above the ground, it only had to hunch slightly to meet my eyes. It had antlers, hooves, rotting skin. But the mouths were the worst. There were mouths everywhere. One appeared beside an ear, another opened where an eye had been. The eye rolled sideways. The mouth closed around it. Teeth crushed the eyeball into pale liquid. Another mouth formed beneath it. Then another. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Mouths inside mouths. All laughing, each in a different voice. High laughter. Deep laughter. Cackling, screaming laughter. Its flesh peeled and shifted as new mouths appeared. I nearly vomited. A cloven hoof reached toward me. Behind the creature, I saw the purple sky. It was almost purring. Happy, it wanted this. A thought entered my mind. This is good. For 1 second, I almost believed it. Then something inside me snapped. I screamed. One human voice against 1,000 mouths. I screamed until my lungs hurt. The sky changed. Its colors twisted violently. Angry, good, the trees pulled away slightly. The creature stepped back. That was my chance. I pulled. One foot came loose, then my leg. The creature lunged. I kicked it. My foot struck something cold and slippery. The creature staggered. I freed one arm, then the other. Suddenly, I fell. A branch caught my ankle. I hung upside down. From that angle, the creature looked even worse. Above it, the sky seemed to be moving wildly. Scrambling, angry, I don't belong to you. I threw the thought upward. Something answered. You will see. I tore my ankle free. Then I fell. I hit the grass hard. Pain exploded through my body. I didn't stop. I ran. The creature came after me. Hooves struck the ground behind me. The laughter had changed. It wasn't playful anymore. It sounded furious. I followed the path I'd made during my first visit. Through the grass, between the trees, past the twisting branches. The creature stayed behind me. Closer, then farther, then closer again. I don't know how long I ran. Eventually, darkness began closing around the edges of my vision. The world narrowed. The trees faded. The laughter disappeared. Then I was back. My bedroom. City lights outside the window. The radiator. The boxes. The mattress. I rolled onto the floor. My heart hammered. For several minutes, I couldn't convince myself that I was actually awake. Then I noticed something on my foot. Slime. Exactly where I'd kicked the creature. I touched it. Cold, oily, sticky, it smelled strangely sweet. I stared at it. No fucking way. I sat there for hours afterward, thinking, trying to explain it. There were only two conclusions I could reach. First, those weren't dreams. The cut on my shoulder proved something had happened. The slime proved it even more. You don't bring physical objects back from dreams. I had gone somewhere. The mattress had taken me there. Somehow, that disgusting free mattress sitting on my bedroom floor was a doorway, a portal. Every time I slept on it, I went beneath that breathing purple sky, and something there knew me now. The second conclusion came a little later. It was much simpler and much more terrifying. I looked at the mattress. I hadn't slept properly in days. My eyes burned. My head felt heavy. My body was begging me to rest. Sooner or later, exhaustion would win, and when it did, I knew exactly where I would wake up. The white willows would be waiting. The purple sky would be waiting. And somewhere among those trees, that thing with 1,000 laughing mouths would be waiting too. It had already touched me. I'd already hurt it. And somehow, I knew it would remember. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't close my eyes. I couldn't drift off for even a second. Because now I understood the only rule that mattered. I must not go back to sleep. It was a Wednesday. I remember that clearly because on Wednesdays the streets were covered in money. Not loose change, not a few forgotten bills, hundreds of dollars, thousands sometimes. Cash lay across sidewalks, gutters, lawns, and roads as if it meant nothing. $100 bills would tumble through the streets when the wind picked up. Some got caught beneath parked cars. Others floated into drains or became soaked in puddles. Nobody chased after them. Nobody fought over them. Nobody even seemed interested. Outside almost every house, people set up tables covered with the most expensive food they could afford. There were whole tuna laid over beds of ice, piles of tropical fruit, expensive cakes, fresh bread, and entire pigs slowly roasting over open fires. The smell on Wednesday mornings was incredible. Smoke, meat, sugar, fruit, all of it mixed together and drifted through town. My family was poor, so we were exempt from putting out a feast of our own. We simply walked through the neighborhood and ate whatever our neighbors offered. Nobody minded. That was the point. You were supposed to share what you didn't need. You could even pick up some of the money from the streets if you wanted. Just enough. That was the rule. The problem was that nobody knew exactly what enough meant. Was $20 enough? 100? 500? What if you already had food in your refrigerator? What if your rent was already paid? What if you had medicine? Did that count as wealth? Nobody knew. And nobody wanted to find out. So my family never touched the money. It wasn't worth the gamble. People from outside town sometimes thought the Wednesday tradition was generosity. It wasn't. It was fear. We never owned more than we needed because the wardens made sure of it. Nobody knew exactly how they measured wealth. We only knew that if you possessed too much at any given time, they came to balance your books. Wednesday was payday for most people in town. So every Wednesday, people took whatever money they needed to survive the coming weeks. Then, they got rid of the rest. Some threw it into the streets. Others spent it immediately. A lot of families bought food and placed it outside for everyone to eat. Wasteful? Maybe. But waste was better than being wealthy. I remember the first time I saw what happened to someone who ignored the rule. A family was passing through town. Their car broke down nearby, so they ended up staying at the local hotel while they waited for repairs. There were 3 of them, a father, a mother, and a son about my age. They arrived on Tuesday. I can only imagine what they thought when they woke up Wednesday morning. They probably looked through the hotel window and thought they'd discovered the strangest town in America. Money everywhere. Food everywhere. Nobody guarding any of it. Nobody stopping anyone from taking it. I don't think anybody properly warned them. Maybe someone tried. But would they have listened? Would you? Imagine walking outside and finding thousands of dollars scattered across the pavement. Then some stranger tells you not to touch it because mysterious creatures called the wardens will come after you if you take too much. You'd probably laugh. You'd assume the locals were trying to scare you away from free money. That's what those parents did. They stuffed their pockets. The son didn't. I don't know why. Maybe he believed us. Maybe children are more willing to accept that the world contains things they don't understand. Or maybe he simply had an instinct his parents lacked. His mother and father understood exactly what money could do. Money meant comfort, food, security, a better house, an easier life. To them, the bills scattered across the pavement weren't pieces of paper. They were possibilities. So they took them. That night, I heard the screaming. Even now, I don't know how to properly describe those screams. They weren't normal screams. There was something primitive in them, something that went beyond pain. It was the sound of a human being discovering that something impossible was happening to their body and realizing nobody could stop it. The fear in those screams seemed contagious. It entered the house. It got under my skin. My father stood by the window, smoking. He didn't look surprised. "Hear that, son?" I nodded. That's what happens when you take money on Wednesdays. He wouldn't let me look outside. He told me to stay in my room. So naturally, I waited until he thought I was asleep. Then I snuck out. By the time I reached the hotel, the screaming had stopped. Rain had started falling. All those beautiful Wednesday feasts were ruined. Food sat on soaked sheets and tables while insects crawled over it. Rainwater carried bills toward the storm drains. The whole town smelled different. Rotting food, wet pavement, smoke dying in the rain. And underneath all of it was something metallic. Blood. Fresh blood. I followed the smell toward the parking lot. That's where I saw what was left of the parents. At first, my brain couldn't understand what I was looking at. There were piles on the pavement, thin rectangular pieces. Some were pale, some red, some white. Then I realized they were pieces of people. The parents had been sliced apart. Not chopped, not torn, sliced, layer by layer. Their skin had been cut into sheets so thin that some pieces were almost transparent beneath the parking lot lights. There were strips of muscle laid across the ground. Some were thin enough that I could see individual fibers. Pieces of bone and teeth were scattered among everything else. Parts of organs, fragments of intestine. Everything separated with impossible precision. It looked less like a murder scene and more like somebody had taken two human beings apart to discover exactly how much each piece was worth. I couldn't move. I couldn't even scream. I remember staring at one strip of muscle and thinking that it was so thin it would probably dissolve if I put it on my tongue. I don't know why I thought that. The thought disgusted me so badly that I barely ate for weeks afterward. My parents thought I was sick. I never told them what I'd seen. I kept wondering what the wardens had done. Had it been quick? The screams suggested otherwise. Had they peeled the parents apart while they were still alive? Had the husband watched his wife being sliced into pieces? Had she watched the same happen to him? Had they begged? Had they apologized? And what about their son? He hadn't taken any money. So what had the wardens done to him? Nothing. That was the cruelty of it. They had spared him. I wondered what he'd seen. Maybe he'd tried to save his parents. Maybe he'd grabbed at the wardens while they worked. Maybe he'd begged them to stop. Maybe he'd watched the only two people he loved being reduced to layers of flesh. Then I heard a wet impact behind me. A splat. Something warm touched my face. Before I even turned around, I tasted it. Iron. Blood. I looked toward the hotel. The boy wasn't on the roof anymore. He was on the pavement. The wardens had spared him. He hadn't spared himself. The next morning, every trace of the family was gone. The town returned to normal. People were almost cheerful. Some even believed the deaths might make the wardens more forgiving. Maybe the punishment had satisfied them. Maybe we'd be allowed to keep a little more now. Nobody tested that theory. Years passed before I saw the wardens again. The second time was because of my sister. She had cancer. We lived in a tiny town. Proper treatment was in the city, and treatment cost money. A lot of money. More value than our family was allowed to hold at once. My father was diabetic. His insulin alone kept our family dangerously close to whatever invisible limit the wardens had established for us. That's why our family never had extra money to throw into the streets on Wednesdays. We were already using everything we were allowed to possess. Then, my sister got sick. She was the smartest person in our family. She wanted to become a nurse. And she wasn't one of those kids who talked about big dreams without doing anything about them. She had the grades. She studied constantly. She'd even earned a scholarship to a major Ivy League school. If anyone was going to escape our town and build a normal life, it was her. Then cancer arrived. Suddenly, none of her grades mattered. Her scholarship didn't matter. Her plans didn't matter. All that mattered was treatment. And treatment required money. Money we weren't allowed to have. I watched my parents struggle with it. There was no good decision. If we stayed within the warden's rules, my sister might die. If we gathered enough money for her treatment, someone might have to pay for it another way. I kept thinking about the family from the hotel, especially the boy. I had been around his age when I'd found him. I remembered his parents spread across the parking lot in thin layers. I remembered the sound when his body hit the ground. I remembered the blood. And then, one Wednesday morning, I made my decision. I would take the money. All of it. Or at least as much as I could carry. The family at the hotel hadn't been attacked until after sunset. That meant I had time. At least, I hoped it did. I could collect the money, get my sister out of town, and reach the city before night. Maybe the wardens couldn't follow us beyond the town limits. Maybe their rules only existed there. It wasn't much of a plan. But watching my sister slowly die wasn't a plan either. I tried sneaking out early. She caught me. "Where are you going?" She couldn't sleep properly because of the chemotherapy. She stood there holding on to her IV pole. "Going for a run," I said. She looked me up and down. "Yeah, right, fat ass," despite everything, I laughed. "You caught me. I'm going to try the tacos Mr. Eduardo put out. I'll be back soon." I turned toward the door. "Hey," I looked back. Her expression had changed. "Don't do anything stupid." For a moment, I wondered if she knew. Maybe sisters always know. I won't. Then I left. The streets were already covered in money. I dropped to my knees and started grabbing. $100 bills, one after another. I shoved them into a large trash bag. Every bill reminded me of the hotel. The father, the mother, their son. I could almost hear the screaming again. Would that be me tonight? Would somebody find my skin sliced into transparent sheets? Would my bones be scattered across the road like coins? I forced myself to stop thinking about it. I grabbed more. My knees scraped against the pavement. Small rocks and pieces of glass cut into my skin. I barely noticed. All I could think about was my sister. 16 years old, cancer, a scholarship, waiting for her. A life she hadn't even had the chance to live. I kept grabbing money. Eventually, I had enough. More than enough. I ran home. I burst through the door carrying the bag. "We can pay for her chemo now." My father started screaming. My mother covered her mouth and cried. My sister stared at me. Her expression is something I'll never forget. There was fear, horror, anger, but underneath all of it, for only a second, I saw hope. She wanted to live. Of course she did. I wanted her to live too. I think some part of my parents felt relief. I had made the decision for them. They didn't have to choose between letting their daughter die or breaking the warden's rule. I'd already broken it. I'd sacrificed myself. As far as they were concerned, I was dead. The only question was whether my death could buy my sister enough time to survive. We needed to leave immediately. The sun was already moving toward the horizon. We didn't own a car. We asked neighbors for help. Nobody agreed. We tried buses. No, everyone knew what I'd done. They saw the trash bag over my shoulder. They knew what was inside. And they knew what would come after sunset. Nobody wanted to be near me when the wardens arrived. I hated them for it. But I understood. They wanted to live too, even if their survival meant watching 2 teenagers die. By late afternoon, I realized nobody was coming to help us. Then I thought about the town border. What if we could simply walk out? Maybe the wardens couldn't cross it. We had no proof. But we had nothing else. So we ran. My sister struggled almost immediately. The chemotherapy had weakened her. Her joints hurt. She bruised easily. When she fell, small cuts kept bleeding longer than they should have. I helped her back up every time. Then we kept moving. We ran until my lungs burned, until my calves felt like they were full of broken glass, until breathing itself hurt. The trash bag of money felt heavier with every kilometer, but I refused to drop it. That money was why we were doing this. Without it, my sister still couldn't get treatment. Eventually, we reached the edge of town. The road stretched through tall evergreens. Somewhere ahead was the sign marking the border. Please come again. We were only a few kilometers away. Then the sun disappeared. Completely night. I had my sister over one shoulder by then. The bag of money hung over the other. I was barely running anymore. More like stumbling forward as quickly as my body allowed. Then we heard it. Footsteps. At first, I thought it was a group of people. Then I realized there were too many. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Bare feet striking pavement. Rapid, perfectly synchronized. There was no breathing, no shouting, no voices ordering us to stop. Only footsteps, slapping against the road like thousands of angry hands pounding on stone. My sister screamed. Keep going. I tried. They're coming. I know. She started crying for Mom. That almost broke me. For one horrible second, I thought about dropping her. I could run faster alone, leave the money, leave my sister, reach the border, then tell everyone she had made it to the city. Nobody would ever know. Except me. And that was enough. I tightened my grip around her. Then, I ran harder. I never looked behind me. To this day, I don't know exactly what the wardens look like. My imagination has filled in the blank. Sometimes I dream they're naked, human-shaped creatures. Sometimes they're men wearing suits. Sometimes they're a gigantic centipede made from hundreds of legs. Sometimes they're something like a snake. And sometimes there is nothing behind me at all. Just footsteps. That version scares me the most. The sign appeared ahead. Please come again. The road sloped downward toward it. We were close, but the wardens were closer. I could feel warmth against the back of my neck. Something was directly behind me. My sister screamed so loudly beside my ear that everything became muffled. Then something grabbed her. Her body jerked backward. I held tighter. No, I kept running. Something cold touched my neck. Dry fingers. At least I think they were fingers. Long nails dragged gently across my skin. Or claws. Or teeth, I don't know. I refused to turn around. I knew what would happen if I did. They would pull me down. My face would hit the road. I'd taste asphalt and dirt. Then they would balance my books. They would peel me apart. Maybe my skin would become rectangles shaped like bills. Maybe my bones would be broken into coins. Maybe they'd slice my sister into ribbons. The thought repeated inside my head with every step. Run, run, run. Something pulled at my sister again. I screamed. She screamed. The footsteps surrounded everything. Then my foot caught something. I fell. My sister hit the ground beside me. The trash bag landed nearby. I curled instinctively, waiting for hands to grab me. Nothing happened. I waited. Still nothing. Then I looked up. There was a sign above us, but I wasn't looking at the back of it anymore. I could see the front. Welcome, we had crossed the border. I slowly turned around. The road behind us was empty. No wardens, no army, no monsters. Only the dark road disappearing between enormous evergreen trees. I laughed. Then I cried. Then I think I did both at the same time. My sister sat beside me. She was alive. I looked at her face. A rectangular patch of flesh was missing from her cheek. Perfectly rectangular, like someone had begun balancing our books, but had been forced to stop halfway through. She touched the wound. Her fingers came away bloody. Neither of us said anything. Then I checked the bag. Still there. Still full. $200,000. 2,000 $100 bills. Enough money to change our lives. Enough money to get my sister treatment. Enough money to get us killed if we ever went home. So we didn't. We kept walking. Eventually, we found a gas station. The person working there stared at us when we walked inside. We must have looked insane. Two exhausted teenagers covered in sweat and blood, one carrying a trash bag full of cash. We called a taxi. Then we went straight to the hospital. My sister survived. That's the important part. The chemotherapy worked. She recovered. Eventually, she went to college. Everything she had worked for before getting sick was still waiting for her. She got the future she deserved. I never returned home. Not once. Sometimes I think about it. I wonder what would happen if I crossed that border again. Would the wardens remember me? Would they consider my account still open? Would they finish taking what they started from my sister? Would they finally balance my books? I don't intend to find out. I still write letters home. I send them to my parents. I tell them about my sister, about school, about our lives, about everything we've managed to build outside that town. I tell them I'm sorry. I tell them I miss them. I tell them that what I did was worth it. I've sent dozens over the years. I've never received a single letter back. Maybe my parents are angry. Maybe they moved. Maybe the wardens don't allow letters out. Or maybe my family isn't there anymore. I try not to think about that possibility. Wednesday is still difficult for me. Whenever I see money lying on the ground, even a single dollar, I leave it there. People laugh sometimes. Someone will point and say, "Hey, free money." I keep walking. They don't understand. To them, it's just a dollar. To me, it's an invitation. Sometimes I'll walk past a restaurant on a Wednesday and smell roasted meat. For a moment, I'm back home. Tables line the streets. Whole fish lie on ice. Fruit is piled high. Pigs turn slowly above open fires. $100 bills tumble through the gutters. And everyone carefully takes only what they need. Sometimes, in those memories, I hear footsteps, hundreds of them. Thousands, bare feet pounding against pavement. No breathing, no voices, no warning, just the wardens coming to balance the books. My sister doesn't like talking about that night. The scar on her cheek never disappeared. It's still almost perfectly rectangular. People ask her about it sometimes. She usually makes up a story, an accident, a surgery. Anything easier than the truth. Maybe that's better. She escaped. She deserves to live without constantly thinking about them. But I can't forget. I was the one carrying the money. I was the one who heard those footsteps getting closer. I was the one who felt those cold fingers on my neck. Sometimes, I wake up convinced I can hear them again. I'll lie completely still in bed, listening, thump, thump, thump. Then I realize it's only my heartbeat. At least, I think it is. There is one thing I've never been able to understand. The wardens let us escape. We crossed some invisible line, and they stopped. If they were powerful enough to turn two people into paper-thin pieces of flesh, why couldn't they follow us another few feet? Maybe they weren't allowed. Maybe the rules worked both ways. That's the thought that gives me comfort. Because rules mean limits, and things with limits can be escaped. But sometimes I remember what my father used to say. The wardens weren't monsters. They weren't demons. They were accountants. They didn't hate us. They didn't enjoy hurting people. They simply corrected imbalance. If that was true, then crossing the border didn't erase what I did. It only moved me somewhere they couldn't collect. For now. I try not to think about those words. For now. My sister survived cancer and went to college. That's enough for me. I bought her a life with money that wasn't mine. If the wardens ever find a way to collect what I owe, I know exactly what they'll want. Until then, every Wednesday, I keep my pockets empty. And if I ever see a $100 bill lying on the pavement, I don't care how badly I need it. I walk around it. Sorry to pause for just a moment. If this is your first time here, welcome. I hope you're enjoying the calm so far. If you'd like more nights like this, true stories, gentle rain, no interruptions, please subscribe to Lacuna Noir. It really helps me keep creating these peaceful experiences for you. And tap the bell so you're here every time a new story arrives in the dark. Now, back to the story. I'm alive, and I still don't understand how. By every reasonable explanation, I should be dead. Sometimes, after everything I saw and heard, I wish I were. But Jason is still missing. People have already started deciding what happened to him, and somebody needs to know what really happened in those woods, even if nobody believes me. It started with a UFO conspiracy podcast called Truth Nuke. I don't remember exactly when I discovered it. I think someone posted a clip online. I listened out of curiosity, and before long, I was going through the entire archive. Once I started listening, I couldn't stop. I've always wanted to believe there was something else out there. Aliens, intelligent life, something beyond humanity. Truth Nuke gave me exactly what I wanted. The host called himself the Shepherd. Every episode was filled with the usual conspiracy material. Government cover-ups, secret military projects, UFO sightings that supposedly proved aliens were already living among us. Most of it was ridiculous. I knew that. At least I thought I did. But the Shepherd was good at making ridiculous things sound possible. Then, he released an episode that felt different. I was driving when I played it. Jason was sitting beside me in the passenger seat. Since I was behind the wheel, I had control of the music, and unfortunately for Jason, that meant he had to listen to Truth Nuke. The Shepherd's voice exploded through the speakers. Hello, real world, or those of you still claiming to live in it. It's your good shepherd here. As always, I'm here to help keep you sheep away from the wolves. Welcome, one and all, to Truth Nuke. A ridiculous explosion sound effect followed. Jason reached toward the dashboard and lowered the volume. I immediately turned it back up. The Shepherd continued. Today's Truth Nuke is a big one. After years of cover-ups and close encounters, we are on the eve of first contact. NASA claims a signal picked up from across the galaxy is nothing but a dying star. Well, dying stars don't speak. Then he played the signal. I loved it immediately. I know that sounds strange because it wasn't a pleasant sound. It was somewhere between a radio frequency and a voice. There were several layers moving through one another. Some parts rose while others fell. There was a rhythm hidden inside it, but every time I thought I understood the pattern, it changed. I could feel the vibrations in my teeth. Instead of frightening me, it made me excited. Encoded in this signal, the shepherd said, are coordinates telling us exactly where these visitors intend to land once they arrive on planet Earth. I've cracked the code. Can you? I glanced at Jason. He wasn't cracking any alien code. He was lighting his pipe. Within seconds, the sweet, skunky smell filled the car. Come on, man. You really have to smoke that right now? Jason cracked the window and slowly exhaled. Why not? Let's start the weekend early. Open road ahead of us. What's the worst that could happen? We're not going to a party. We're going to make history. I don't think failed hypotheses usually make history books. The important word there is failed. This isn't going to fail. Jason gave me the look he'd been giving me for years. Part affection, part exhaustion. Mostly wondering how he'd ended up living with someone like me. Why are you so convinced this is an alien landing zone? He paused dramatically. Oh shit. Maybe you've been an alien this entire time. That would explain why you're so fucking weird. The weird person in this car is the guy who brought a microwave camping. You brought a generator. That's different. It's really not. I ignored him. How are you not excited? If this is real, we're about to get definitive proof that humanity isn't alone. Think about what we could learn. Think about what they could teach us. Jason shrugged. We're doing okay without them. I almost laughed. Are you serious? The world's on fire, the economy is garbage, and neither of us has a girlfriend. Humanity clearly needs help. Speak for yourself. I don't need E.T. finding me a girlfriend. What if E.T. wants to be your girlfriend? Jason groaned. Oh, God. Now I know where your imagination is going. My imagination is going toward aliens helping us advance as a species. This isn't Star Trek, Steve. When we graduate, we'll probably be designing missiles for the military or launching rockets for billionaires. We're not going to be working with aliens building flying saucers. If money is all you care about, imagine what discovering extraterrestrial life would do for us. Research fellowships, grants, we could win a Nobel Prize. Jason became quiet. Then he sighed. I understand. In your head, this is definitely aliens. For me, this is probably going to be a relaxing weekend where I get high in the woods and stare at the stars. If E.T. actually shows up and wants a date, I'll send them your way. I let the argument die. Instead, I turned the signal louder. As we drove farther into the countryside, I could have sworn it became stronger. Maybe that was my imagination. Now, I don't think it was. The coordinates eventually led us off the highway and onto a fire road cutting deep into the woods. By then, the afternoon sunlight was coming sideways through the pine trees. We parked and opened the trunk. I was mentally going through our equipment when Jason suddenly stopped moving. Steve? What? I don't think we're alone. I laughed. Let me guess. Aliens are standing behind me. No, I'm serious. I looked where he was pointing. About 100 yards away, between the trees, was a camper. It had been parked crookedly between two large oaks. Around it were antenna arrays, a tripod-mounted dish, folding tables, coolers, and enough electronic equipment to suggest whoever owned the camper had been there for some time. Probably another Truth Nuke listener, I said. Maybe we should introduce ourselves. Jason wasn't convinced. Random guy camping alone in the middle of nowhere. Could be trouble. Before I could answer, a voice blasted through a megaphone. Identify yourselves, assholes, or I will blow you off the face of this fucking earth. Birds exploded from the nearby trees. Jason looked at me. I looked at him. Looks like we're introducing ourselves. We're friendly, Jason shouted. What? We're friendly. Get closer. Neither of us liked that instruction. Still, we slowly approached. The man waiting beside the camper looked like someone who had spent years doing push-ups while ignoring every other form of exercise. He wore tactical cargo pants, an old military cap, and the kind of stare you usually see in photographs of people who have been through something terrible. He lowered the megaphone. "Who the fuck are you, and why are you out here?" I answered before Jason could. "We're postgrad students, just camping." He stared at us. Then, something clicked behind his eyes. "You two here for the aliens?" I immediately looked at Jason. Jason rolled his eyes. "You listen to Truth Nuke?" I asked. "Oh, fuck yeah. The Shepherd is my Lord and Savior. Other than Jesus Christ, obviously. Jason asked his name. "Lonnie," I held out my hand. "I'm Steve. This is Jason. We came out here to witness history. Today," Lonnie shook his head. "Tomorrow, Shepard's latest calculations say they're arriving in about 13 hours. "Seriously?" "Yep, that's after factoring in light speed." I had no idea whether that made scientific sense. At that moment, I didn't care. We had 13 hours. Lonnie suggested starting a fire. Jason and I returned to the car for our equipment. The moment we were far enough away, Jason turned toward me. "Just our fucking luck." "What?" "If aliens actually land here, and the first human they meet is that guy, they'll immediately conclude there's no intelligent life on Earth. He's a little strange." "A little?" "Steve, that man looks like he might cut us open while we're sleeping just to check whether we're human." I looked back toward the camper. Lonnie had disappeared behind it. "Okay, maybe we should have some kind of emergency signal." Jason grabbed a tire iron from the trunk. "Exactly. What about 3 rapid blinks? What if we're separated?" "Fine. A phrase." Jason thought for a moment. "If I tell you the stars are out, it means we get the fuck out of here." I looked toward the bright afternoon sky. "Sounds good." We set up our tent a comfortable distance from Lonnie's camper. His campsite was much better equipped than ours. Multiple coolers, antennas, electronics, a gun rack, a folding table covered with equipment I didn't recognize. When we gathered around his fire, Lonnie became suspicious of our GPS coordinates. "Why over there?" he asked. "Why not right here?" "That's where GPS showed the coordinates." Lonnie laughed. "Your GPS is lying. If this was really where aliens were landing, the government would black out the signal harder than your mothers were blacked out the nights you two were conceived." I checked my phone. No reception. Jason checked his. "Nothing, we don't have a signal," I said. Lonnie laughed again. This time he seemed genuinely pleased. "All right. I take it back. This is definitely the place. Stay close." Then he walked to the edge of the clearing, unzipped his pants, and began urinating while giving the sky his middle finger. "Prove me right, motherfuckers." Jason put a hand on my shoulder. "A whole weekend with this guy. If we die, I'm blaming you." Things became stranger from there. At one point, Lonnie stared into the trees and said the woods reminded him of Afghanistan. I asked if he'd served. He didn't answer. Instead, he disappeared into the trees with a rifle. A few seconds later, gunshots started. Jason and I quietly continued setting up camp. Eventually, the shooting stopped. Lonnie returned carrying a dead bird by its feet. "Yes, still got it." He held it proudly in front of us. "You boys want some government spy drone?" By sunset, the bird was cooking over the fire. Truth Nuke played through a portable speaker. The Shepherd was talking about aliens replacing humans with doubles. Lonnie looked at us. "You want beer?" "Sure," I said. Jason shook his head. "I'm good, I insist." Jason frowned. "Why?" "To prove you're not a fucking alien. If you're human, a little beer won't hurt you." Jason and I exchanged looks. Then both of us accepted a beer. Lonnie smiled and produced 2 six-packs. As darkness settled over the woods, empty cans accumulated around the fire. Lonnie drank faster than either of us. The drunker he became, the more complicated his theories became. According to Lonnie, alien signals were transmitted through special frequencies that could only be understood by people whose chakras were properly aligned. Jason asked how someone aligned their chakras. Peyote, Lonnie answered. Peyote? Yeah, peyote. For the next 20 minutes, he connected nearly every conspiracy theory I'd ever heard into one enormous explanation of reality. Government experiments, Russian children, Sasquatches from another star system, ancient disasters, lizard people, Hollywood cults, surveillance pigeons, pyramids, somehow, everything connected. When he finally finished, silence surrounded the fire. Wow, I said. It was the only response I had. Later, Lonnie went to his truck looking for ammunition. We heard him throwing things around and swearing. Jason grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the edge of the firelight. We need to leave. He's drunk. He's more than drunk. Stop yelling, Lonnie shouted from his truck. There was a pause. Sorry, that wasn't directed at you guys. I'm talking to myself. You're good. I called. Jason stared at me. Steve, what? The stars are fucking out. I understood immediately. Our emergency phrase. Leave now. I looked toward Lonnie's truck. Okay, but if we suddenly leave, he might get angry. Let's wait until he passes out. Jason clearly hated the idea. Before he could argue, Lonnie returned. We're out of bullets. You fired everything? Yep, completely defenseless. I noticed something near the cooler. One bullet. I didn't mention it. Jason said, good thing nobody else is around. Lonnie stared into the trees. That's what you think. Then he became completely still. Do you hear that? We listened. Nothing, that was the problem. No insects, no wind, no distant traffic. Nothing. The forest had become completely silent. I don't like it, Lonnie whispered. The quiet? He nodded. I quickly turned on some music. Beethoven's Fifth. It was the least offensive thing I had downloaded. Lonnie seemed calmer. Then he stood. All right, no guns. So I'm going to teach you betas how to fight like alphas. He lined us up like students. According to Lonnie, he was fluent in all 150 martial arts. His lesson mostly consisted of repeatedly demonstrating how to strike someone in the groin. Jason wasn't impressed. I don't fight. Lonnie stared at him like he'd just insulted his religion. What? I don't fight. Those who don't fight don't survive. Is E.T. going to throw hands with us? They might. More than two if they've got. Jason shrugged. I don't think aliens would travel across the galaxy just to start a fistfight. You'd be surprised what those big-headed fuckers come here for. I tried redirecting the conversation. I think they'd want to share knowledge. Lonnie looked at me. You believe in sunshine and rainbows too? Technically, both of those exist. Eventually, he started talking about something called the dark forest theory. I'd never heard of it. Jason had. He explained that the idea was simple. Imagine many intelligent civilizations exist throughout the universe, but none communicate because every civilization fears the others. Lonnie leaned toward the fire. Imagine you're hunting in a dark forest. You hear something moving in the bushes. Could be a squirrel, could be a mountain lion about to tear your throat out. You don't know. He stared at me. You could fire your gun, maybe scare it away. But you're not the only hunter in the forest. The forest is too big. There have to be others. They're hungry. They're scared. They've got weapons. The fire cracked between us. You want those other hunters knowing where you're standing? Maybe we could cooperate. Lonnie laughed. You really have a beautiful picture of aliens. Jason pointed toward me. He thinks they're going to come down like Jesus and fix everything. They could advance humanity thousands of years. You assume they're better than us. They'd have to be advanced to achieve interstellar travel. Lonnie shook his head. Humans split the atom and immediately used it to build weapons. What makes you think aliens would be any different? I didn't have a good answer. Then Lonnie became serious. Let me tell you a story. He pointed at me, especially you. It's an abduction story. That got my attention. Lonnie claimed he had been abducted while in basic training. He remembered seeing a bright light. Then, nothing. The next thing he remembered was waking inside a dark room. There were shapes around him. He couldn't clearly see what they looked like, but he could hear them laughing. What he described after that wasn't funny. Not even slightly. I won't repeat the details. Whatever had happened to Lonnie, or whatever he believed had happened, was horrific. When he finished, the silence around the fire felt heavier than before. Then, Jason laughed. I understand why. Some of the details sounded ridiculous if you ignored what Lonnie was actually describing. But Lonnie didn't see it that way. His face became rigid. This is funny to you? Jason, I warned. I'm sorry. It just caught me off guard. It caught you off guard? My fucking abduction caught me off guard, too. Jason apologized. I looked at him until he finally controlled himself. Then I made the mistake of telling Lonnie sincerely that I was sorry. Something about the seriousness of my voice broke Jason again. He started laughing. Lonnie exploded. 1 second, he was beside the fire. The next, he was on Jason. I jumped between them. Stop. Jason had the tire iron raised. Get back. Lonnie pointed at him. Only an alien reacts like that. Only an alien. Stay away from me. Lonnie, stop. Finally, he did. He stared at Jason, then me, then somewhere beyond both of us. Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the darkness. Jason looked at me. Fuck. Then his expression changed. Steve, I think you're a dumbass, but you're still my roommate. I'm giving you one last chance to come to your senses and leave with me. Okay, I finally agreed. Let me get my things. Be quick. Jason headed toward the car. I entered the tent and started stuffing things into my bag. The forest had become silent again. The Truth Nuke podcast was still playing faintly through the speaker. The shepherd was finishing his episode. The signal is growing stronger and stronger. We are only moments away from a close encounter of every kind. For those fans who answered my call to arms, I know you'll understand what has to be done next. I stopped packing. Your sacrifices will not be in vain. Something about those words bothered me. I grabbed my bag and rushed outside. Jason? The car was running, headlights on, driver's door open. Jason wasn't there. Jason? Nothing. I looked around the campsite. Empty beer cans, dying fire. Lonnie's rifle resting near the cooler. Jason? Come on, man, this isn't funny. Then I turned. My flashlight caught something dark on the ground. Blood. A trail of it disappeared into the trees. For several seconds, I couldn't move. Then I followed it. I don't know why. Maybe because Jason was my friend. Maybe because panic had taken over. The trail led deeper into the woods. Away from the car. Away from the campsite. The strange signal was audible again, except no speaker was playing it now. It seemed to be coming from the air itself, the same layered frequency, the same almost voice. My flashlight moved between the trees. Then it found 2 feet. I stopped. Jason was lying on the ground. His body had been badly beaten. His face, I don't want to describe his face. I knew immediately he was dead. I stood there shaking. Then a voice came from behind me. They're here. I spun around. Lonnie stood about 15 feet away. Blood covered his clothes, his skin, his hands. He was staring upward, and he looked completely calm. We better run while we still can, he said. The light's coming. The signal became louder. Higher, it pressed against my skull. I ran. Lonnie ran after me. Branches tore at my clothes. I heard him getting closer. He caught me near the tree line, his hands wrapped around my throat. I couldn't breathe. I remembered the stupid lesson he'd given us. All 150 martial arts. One useful move. I drove my knee into his groin as hard as I could. Lonnie collapsed. I ran back toward camp. He started getting up behind me. When I reached the fire, I saw the bullet, the one I'd noticed earlier, still lying beside the cooler. Then I saw Lonnie's rifle. My hands moved before I consciously decided what to do. I loaded the bullet. Stay back. Lonnie emerged from the darkness. He slowed when he saw the rifle. Then he smiled. You shoot me, they'll know where you are, Hunter. My hands trembled. They'll all know. He lunged. I fired. I don't remember hitting the ground. One moment I was standing, the next I was lying in the dirt. Lonnie was nearby. I could hear him breathing. Neither of us seemed capable of moving. Then the forest became bright. There was a light above us, not the moon, not headlights, not anything I can properly describe. It was enormous, silent, growing brighter. Lonnie stared at it. So did I. The signal rose until it wasn't really sound anymore. It became pressure. It filled my chest, my skull, my teeth. Then the shepherd's voice came from the speaker near the car. See, his voice sounded different. Something existed underneath it, something that had always been there. We didn't need to do anything. The voice began changing. Humans are their own worst enemies. Then he laughed. The sound was layered, harmonic, impossible. Lonnie had described that laugh earlier. The laughter from the dark room. Now I heard it too. And it wasn't human. The light became white. Then it became everything. The first thing I remember afterward was cold. Not the cold of lying outside at night. This was artificial, sterile, like being inside a freezer. I was lying on something hard and narrow. I couldn't move properly. But I wasn't tied down. Bright lights hung above me, though I couldn't see where the light itself came from. There were shapes around the edges of the room. Tall shapes. At least, I think they were tall. Every time I tried looking directly at them, my eyes seemed to slide away. It was like my brain couldn't process what it was seeing. They moved around me. There were instruments nearby. Metallic objects reflected colors I had never seen before. Something was being done to me. I knew that much. I couldn't feel pain. That should have comforted me. It didn't. The shapes moved efficiently. They weren't excited. They weren't curious. They behaved like workers completing an ordinary task. Whatever I was to them, I wasn't special. I managed to turn my head slightly. One instrument was long and thin. Maybe a scalpel. Maybe something that doesn't have a human name. One of the shapes stopped near my head. I felt its attention. I can't explain that any better. I didn't see eyes. I don't know whether it even had eyes. But I knew it was looking at me. And in that moment, I had a certainty that went deeper than thought. Whatever they were doing to me had been planned before Jason and I ever drove into those woods. The lights became brighter. A tone pulsed somewhere nearby. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I was in a hospital. Just like that. No transition. No memory of leaving the room. A nurse entered. Then a doctor. Then I noticed 2 police officers standing near the doorway. Eventually, they told me what they knew. A truck driver had found me unconscious on the shoulder of a rural county road at around 5:15 that morning. I had cuts consistent with a physical struggle. There was severe bruising around my throat, and my clothes were covered in blood. A lot of blood. It wasn't mine. Jason was missing. His phone had been found in my car. The car itself was at the trailhead with the driver's door open. There was no sign of Jason. There was also no sign of Lonnie. That part didn't make sense. Police found no record of anyone named Lonnie being at those coordinates. No campsite permit. No vehicle registration. Nothing. They searched the area. They found our tent, our equipment, our fire pit, spent bullet casings, a large amount of blood. But no camper, no antenna equipment, no gun rack, no evidence that Lonnie had ever been there. As far as the police could determine, Jason and I had gone into those woods alone. I'm now a person of interest in Jason's disappearance. I've been told not to leave the state. It's been 11 days since the hospital discharged me. I'm writing this from my apartment. I still can't sleep properly. Whenever I do, I hear the signal. Sometimes I wake with my hands stretched in front of me as though I'm trying to protect myself from something standing over my bed. I understand how this looks. Believe me. A man obsessed with a conspiracy podcast takes his friend into the woods. The friend disappears. The man is later discovered covered in someone else's blood. He tells police about a mysterious stranger nobody can prove existed. Then he starts talking about lights in the sky and strange figures performing procedures on him. I know exactly what conclusion you would reach. I'd probably reach the same conclusion, but I can't stop thinking about Lonnie, especially his story. He told us about waking in darkness, about the laughter, about what was done to him. Jason laughed. I didn't. But I also didn't really understand. I wanted aliens to be good. That's the embarrassing truth. I wanted them to arrive and fix us. I imagined an advanced civilization would automatically be wiser than humanity. Kinder, more peaceful. I imagined them sharing technology, teaching us, helping us solve the problems we failed to solve ourselves. I wanted the universe to be generous. I don't know what's generous about any of this. I don't know what happened to Jason after I saw his body. According to the police, they haven't found him. I don't know how that's possible. I saw him. I know what I saw. At least, I think I do. I don't know what happened to me in that cold room. I don't know whether the room was real. I don't know whether the shapes were real. I don't know whether Lonnie was a real person. Maybe he was something pretending to be human. Maybe he was exactly what he claimed to be. Maybe he had been taken once before and whatever happened to him destroyed something inside his mind. Or maybe there never was a Lonnie. Maybe my brain invented him because whatever actually happened was too horrible for me to understand. I don't know. I don't even know whose blood was covering my clothes. But I know something else. Truth Nuke is gone. The entire podcast disappeared during the same weekend we were in those woods. The Shepherd's archive vanished. Every episode, every account, every trace. If you search for it now, you'll find scattered discussions from people who swear they remember listening to it. One thread I found had been locked because of what moderators called coordinated inauthentic activity, whatever that means. But the podcast itself? Gone, and the signal hasn't disappeared. That's the worst part. I still hear it. Not through headphones, not through my computer, not through the car speakers. Inside my head. It exists underneath ordinary sound. When my refrigerator runs, I hear it. When cars pass outside, I hear it. When someone talks to me, I sometimes hear it beneath their voice. When everything becomes quiet, it's clearer, oscillating, layered, almost rhythmic. Exactly like the first time the shepherd played it. Sometimes I think it's getting louder. Sometimes I think there are words hidden inside it. I've stopped trying to understand them. I'm terrified of what might happen if I succeed. I'm not asking anyone reading this to believe me. I'm barely capable of believing myself. I'm posting because Jason is missing, and the people investigating his disappearance already seem convinced they know what happened. They look at me differently now. They ask the same questions in slightly different ways. They want me to contradict myself. Maybe eventually I will. My memory already feels damaged. But I know Jason was with me. I know Lonnie was there. I know we heard the signal. And I know something came out of that sky. If anyone else was in those woods that weekend, I need you to contact me. If you listen to Truth Nuke, tell me. If you remember the shepherd, tell me. If you decoded those coordinates and went somewhere else, tell me what you found. Most importantly, if anyone knows who or what Lonnie was, I need to know. I keep returning to something he told us. The dark forest. You're a hunter walking through darkness. You hear movement nearby. You don't know what's hiding there. Maybe it's harmless. Maybe it isn't. So you remain quiet. You hide. You don't reveal where you are because somewhere in that darkness there may be another hunter. I used to think that idea was depressing. Now I think maybe it was a warning. Humanity has spent decades sending signals into space, announcing ourselves, looking for someone to answer. Maybe something finally did, or maybe something had already been listening. Maybe the shepherd wasn't helping us discover aliens. Maybe he was helping them find the right people. People like me. People desperate enough to believe. People willing to drive into the middle of nowhere because a voice on a podcast promised them answers. The shepherd called us sheep. I used to think it was a joke. Now I'm not so sure. Maybe he really was a shepherd, just not ours. I need to know what I was part of. I need to know what happened to Jason. And I need someone else to tell me they can hear the signal too. Because every night, it gets a little harder to ignore. Every night, it sounds a little closer to becoming a voice. And I'm terrified that one night, I'm finally going to understand what it's saying. It has been 5 years, 3 weeks, and 2 days since I retired from the police force. I was 36 years old. Whenever people hear that, they usually assume there must have been some kind of injury. Maybe I got shot. Maybe I damaged my back during an arrest. Maybe I had enough years in another department to qualify for some unusual retirement plan. None of those things happened. I didn't leave because I was too old for the job. I left because of something I saw. More specifically, I left because I couldn't find any way to explain what I saw, and after a while, carrying that memory became harder than carrying the badge. I was a deputy in a small town in western Massachusetts. I won't give you the name. There are people there who still remember the case I'm going to talk about, and I have no interest in bringing strangers to their doors. If you've spent any time in that part of Massachusetts, you probably know the kind of town I mean. Downtown was a few streets with old brick buildings, a small grocery store, a pharmacy, a diner, a gas station, and a couple of churches. Outside the center of town, houses became farther apart until eventually there was nothing but narrow roads and woods. The pines came right up against people's backyards. Streetlights disappeared maybe half a mile outside downtown. At night, once you drove beyond those lights, your headlights were sometimes the only thing separating you from complete darkness. I used to love it. That's important to understand. The woods never frightened me before this happened. I grew up around them. I knew the sounds animals made. I knew how different the forest sounded depending on the season. I knew the difference between something actually moving through the brush and branches shifting because of the wind. Being alone in the woods was peaceful to me. My job was usually peaceful, too. We didn't have much serious crime. There was petty theft, drugs, drunk drivers, teenagers doing stupid things. Occasionally, we'd get domestic violence calls, which were always the worst, because there was something deeply depressing about stepping into someone's home and seeing what people who supposedly loved each other could do. But murder? Almost unheard of. Kidnappings? No, the kind of things that make national news didn't happen there. Most nights were boring. Back then, I considered that a good thing. The call about Hannah came during one of those boring patrols. Hannah isn't her full name. I'm not giving her last name, the town, the road, or anything else that might identify her family. She was a teenager and an excellent student. She was on track to become salutatorian. I didn't personally know her very well, but in a town that small, you tend to know people indirectly. I knew her parents, not closely. Enough to say hello. They were church people. Quiet, friendly. The kind of couple who remembered your name even if they hadn't seen you in 6 months. From everything I knew, Hannah was a good kid from a good family. That night, she called 911. Dispatch contacted me almost immediately. The dispatcher told me the caller was a teenage girl reporting a man in her backyard. At first, that didn't sound particularly unusual. Someone trespassing. A drunk neighbor. Maybe a teenager trying to scare her. Then, dispatch played part of the call. I heard Hannah crying. Not ordinary crying. She was sobbing so badly that she could barely breathe. For about 20 seconds, all I heard was panic. Then it stopped. Completely, that frightened me more than the crying. People don't usually go from that level of terror to complete calm in a second. Hannah's voice became flat. Empty. The dispatcher asked her whether the man was still outside. Hannah said yes. She said he was standing near the large oak tree in the backyard, close to where the property ended and the forest began. The dispatcher asked whether she could describe him. There was a long silence. Then, Hannah whispered something. The muffled curse is real. Another pause. He's here. That was the end of the recording I heard. I remember sitting in the patrol car trying to understand those words. The muffled curse. I'd never heard the phrase before. I assumed it was something teenagers knew about. A local legend, an internet horror story, maybe some stupid challenge spreading around school. I didn't know. I still don't. I accepted the call and headed toward Hannah's house. During the drive, I tried to find a reasonable explanation. Drugs was the first one. Maybe she'd taken acid. Maybe she'd smoked something. Maybe she'd mixed alcohol with medication. People hallucinate. Teenagers panic. A shadow becomes a person. A tree becomes a monster. At the time, that explanation actually comforted me. I remember hoping Hannah was high. That sounds terrible now. But a frightened teenager having a bad reaction to drugs was something I understood. I could deal with that. I could call an ambulance. Her parents could be angry. She could learn a lesson. Everybody would still be alive in the morning. The farther I drove from town, the darker the road became. Eventually, there were no streetlights, only my headlights moving between trees. When I reached Hannah's road, I turned off the main route and drove toward her house. I don't remember seeing another car. I don't remember seeing another person. Her house appeared between the trees. The first thing I noticed was the front door. It was wide open. That immediately changed everything. I parked and got out. I called dispatch and told them what I was seeing. I approached carefully. There was no obvious damage around the entrance. The door hadn't been kicked open. The frame wasn't broken. The lock wasn't hanging loose. It was simply open. Almost like someone had been invited inside. Or like someone inside had wanted me to enter. I announced myself. No answer. The house was dark. Not a single light was on. I called Hannah's name. Nothing. That's when I drew my gun. It was the first time in my career I'd drawn my weapon because I genuinely believed I might need to shoot someone. Training takes over during moments like that. But training doesn't remove fear. I entered. My flashlight moved across the hallway. Furniture, family photographs, shoes near the door. Nothing unusual. I cleared the first room. Empty, then the kitchen. Empty, another room. Nothing. I moved upstairs. Hannah? No response. Her bedroom was empty. The bathroom was empty. Every room I checked looked normal. No signs of a struggle. No blood. No broken furniture. Nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was there. I kept listening. Every tiny sound seemed louder because the house was so quiet. My own breathing bothered me. The sound of my boots bothered me. Even the slight movement of my equipment seemed too loud. I eventually came downstairs. My flashlight was shaking. Not dramatically, just enough that I noticed. I hated that. I was trained. I was armed. I'd dealt with violent people before. Yet something about that house made me feel completely unprepared. Then a light came on outside. I spun toward the windows. The backyard motion sensor had activated. A bright patch of grass appeared beyond the glass. Then I heard a scream, muffled, short, but definitely human. I ran. I don't remember opening the back door. I only remember suddenly being outside with my gun in one hand and flashlight in the other. The motion light illuminated part of the yard. Beyond it was darkness, grass, then the tree line, and there was Hannah. She stood right at the edge of the light. At first, I thought she was alone. Then I saw the hand. It was wrapped around her mouth. A long hand, too long. The fingers stretched completely past her jaw. Another arm was wrapped around her waist. Someone was holding her from behind. I aimed my gun, let her go. Nothing happened. Let her go or I'll shoot. Still nothing. That's when I realized I couldn't actually see whoever was holding her. I know how that sounds. There was someone there. There had to be. I could see the hand. I could see the arm around her. I could see how her body was being held against something. But the rest of him disappeared into the darkness. The shadows didn't seem to fall across his body. They seemed to belong to him. That's the closest description I've ever found. I pointed my flashlight directly at them. It didn't help. Hannah's face was visible. The hand was visible. But behind her was only darkness. Her eyes found mine. I've dreamed about those eyes for 5 years. She didn't need to speak. Everything she wanted to say was there. Help me. Please, do something. I took a step forward. Nothing. Another step. I kept my gun aimed toward where I thought the man's chest should have been. Last warning. No response. Hannah tried to scream. The sound came through the hand covering her mouth. And then I heard the crunch. There are sounds you hear once and somehow understand immediately. This was one of them. Wet, heavy, wrong, Hannah's body bent backward. Not like someone falling, not like someone being thrown. She folded. Her spine bent in a way a human spine isn't supposed to bend. I heard another crack. My finger tightened against the trigger. But what was I supposed to shoot? I couldn't see a target. Hannah disappeared backward into the darkness. 1 second, she was there. The next, she wasn't. I ran toward her. I crossed the yard and reached the tree line. Hannah. Nothing. My flashlight swept across the forest floor. Trees, leaves, rocks, branches, nothing else. I expected to see disturbed ground, broken branches, footprints, anything. There was nothing. Even the grass where Hannah had been standing wasn't flattened. I went deeper. I shouldn't have. Backup hadn't arrived. I had no idea what I was chasing. But I just watched a teenage girl get dragged into those woods. I couldn't stand there doing nothing. I moved between the trees, calling her name. My flashlight bounced across trunks and low branches. Every shadow looked like a person. Every sound made me turn. Hannah. Nothing answered. I went farther. The forest swallowed the light from the house until eventually I couldn't see the backyard anymore. That was when I stopped. Something inside me told me not to continue. It wasn't training. Training would have told me to wait for backup much earlier. This was something more basic. Animal instinct. The feeling prey must have when it realizes a predator is nearby. I suddenly understood that whatever had taken Hannah knew exactly where I was. I couldn't see it, but it could see me. I backed toward the house. Slowly, I didn't turn around. I kept the flashlight moving. Nothing followed, at least nothing I could see. Backup arrived. Then more officers. We searched. Dogs were brought in. Volunteers eventually helped. Hannah's parents returned home and discovered their daughter was missing. I had to stand there while her mother asked me whether Hannah was alive. I couldn't answer. What could I possibly have said? I had seen your daughter. Something was holding her. I watched her body bend backward. Then, darkness swallowed her. Try putting that into an official report. I tried. Not exactly like that, obviously. I wrote what I could. I described seeing Hannah near the tree line. I described an unidentified person restraining her. I described losing visual contact when she was pulled into the woods. The details became cleaner every time someone above me reviewed the report. Cleaner, more reasonable, more acceptable. Eventually, Hannah's case was classified as a runaway, I argued. Not enough, maybe that's something I've lived with. But what evidence did I have? No blood, no body, no footprints, no broken branches, no physical evidence of an attacker. Nothing except the statement of one deputy claiming he'd seen a person he couldn't properly describe. Hannah's parents didn't believe she ran away. Neither did I. I knew there was nowhere for her to run. I had watched something take her. For weeks afterward, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the hand. Those fingers stretching past her jaw. Then her eyes. Then I heard that crunch. Sometimes I'd wake because I thought I heard someone screaming outside. Sometimes I'd check my backyard. I never saw anything. I started researching the phrase she'd used. The muffled curse. I searched old newspapers, local records, internet forums. Folklore, nothing gave me an answer that made sense. Eventually, I stopped. I didn't want an answer anymore. I just wanted the memory to fade. It didn't. Work became impossible. Every nighttime call reminded me of Hannah. Every dark backyard, every tree line, every motion light suddenly switching on. If dispatch sent me anywhere near the woods, my hands started sweating. I became slower, more cautious. That's dangerous in police work. You can't hesitate when another person's life might depend on you. I knew that. So I retired, 36 years old. People asked why. I gave different answers depending on who was asking. Stress, burnout, family reasons. Wanting a different life. Nobody needed the truth. For 5 years, I stayed away from those woods. That wasn't easy. Before Hannah disappeared, walking in the forest had been one of my favorite things. I could spend hours out there. I loved listening to birds. I loved the sound of leaves moving. I loved watching sunlight shift between branches as the day passed. After that night, I couldn't even stand near the tree line. I would look into the shadows and remember that figure, or whatever it was. 5 years passed. Then, today, my phone rang. The caller was a former cop buddy of mine. We still talked occasionally. The moment I heard his voice, I knew something was wrong. He didn't make small talk. He asked whether I was sitting down. I told him to just say it. He mentioned Hannah. My stomach tightened immediately. I hadn't heard her name spoken aloud in a long time. 3 weeks earlier, something had been discovered in the woods. Bones, 7 of them. They weren't scattered. They had been arranged, placed deliberately. Each bone had been cracked cleanly in 2. Not broken randomly. Not damaged by animals. Cracked, someone had sent them for testing. The DNA results came back. They belonged to Hannah. For a while, I couldn't speak. My friend kept talking, but I barely heard him. All I could hear was that sound from 5 years ago, that wet crunch. I finally asked where the bones had been found. He hesitated. Then he told me. Same woods. I asked how far from Hannah's house. Another hesitation. Close enough. I ended the call not long afterward. I've spent most of today thinking about those 7 bones. Why 7? Why arranged? Why broken exactly in half? And why now? That's the part I can't stop thinking about. Hannah disappeared 5 years ago. If those bones had been lying there the entire time, someone should have found them. Those woods were searched. Thoroughly, I was there. Dogs went through them. Officers went through them. Volunteers went through them. We searched the area where those bones were eventually discovered. There was nothing there. So either every one of us somehow missed 7 deliberately arranged human bones, or they weren't there 5 years ago. Someone put them there later. Maybe recently. I don't know which possibility scares me more. I've also started thinking about Hannah's final words again. The muffled curse is real. He's here. She knew something. Maybe she'd heard a story I never found. Maybe she'd seen him before. Maybe that wasn't the first night he came to her house. I've wondered whether the crying on the 911 call was because she'd just seen a stranger outside, or whether she recognized exactly what was standing beneath that oak tree. That possibility bothers me more. I wish I had asked more questions before entering the house. I wish I'd known what the muffled curse meant. Maybe it wouldn't have changed anything. Maybe nothing I did could have changed what happened. But those are the thoughts you live with after something like this. What if I'd arrived 30 seconds earlier? What if I'd fired? What if I'd rushed him instead of giving warnings? What if I'd gone deeper into the woods? There are 1,000 versions of that night in my head. In some, I save Hannah. In others, I disappear with her. The real version is the one I hate most, because I survived and she didn't. There is one other detail I've never put into any report. I've never told Hannah's parents. I've never even told my former partner. I'm only writing it now because the bones have been found. When I was backing out of the woods that night, before backup arrived, I heard something. At the time, I convinced myself it was a branch moving. Then I decided it was an animal. Later, I tried convincing myself I'd imagined it entirely. But I know what I heard. A voice, very quiet, very far away, muffled by the trees. It sounded like Hannah. She said my name, just once. I stopped. Every instinct told me to follow. Every piece of training told me that if a missing victim was calling for help, I had to go toward that voice. I raised my flashlight. Then the voice came again. This time from somewhere completely different. Farther to my left, my blood went cold. Hannah, silence, then my name again. Behind me, deeper in the woods. It couldn't have been her. Nobody could move that quickly. That's when I backed out. For 5 years, I've wondered whether I abandoned her. Now that her bones have been found, part of me knows the answer. Whatever was calling my name wasn't Hannah. It wanted me to follow. I don't know why. Maybe it wanted another victim. Maybe that's what the muffled curse does. Maybe Hannah wasn't the first. And maybe those 7 bones weren't left there to be discovered by accident. Maybe they were a message. I haven't been back to those woods since the night Hannah disappeared. I used to miss them. I don't anymore. I don't miss the bird calls. I don't miss the rustling leaves. I don't miss watching shadows move across the forest floor. Because now I understand something I didn't understand when I was younger. When you're standing outside the woods looking in, shadows seem to move because the sun is moving. When you're standing inside them, sometimes the shadows move even when nothing else does. My old friend asked if I wanted to come by the station. He said there were things about the discovery he couldn't discuss over the phone. I told him no. He asked whether I was sure. I said I was. I don't need to see Hannah's bones. I already know what happened to her. Not exactly. I can't tell you what took her. I can't tell you what the muffled curse means. I can't explain how a man can stand directly in front of you while somehow remaining invisible inside his own shadow. But I know Hannah didn't run away. I know what I saw. And for the first time in 5 years, there is physical evidence proving that at least one part of my story was true. Hannah never left those woods. I wish that made me feel better. It doesn't. Because tonight, about an hour after my former coworker called me, the motion light behind my house came on. I don't live in that town anymore. I moved almost 2 hours away. My backyard isn't even connected to the same forest. I was sitting in my living room when suddenly the yard became bright. I told myself it was a deer. Then I heard something outside, a muffled sound. I didn't move. A few seconds later, I heard it again. Someone was crying, a girl. I stayed in my chair. Every part of me wanted to look through the window. I didn't. Then the crying stopped. That was worse. The house became completely silent. And from somewhere just beyond the light, a girl's voice whispered my name. I haven't looked outside. I won't. I'm 36 years old in my dreams. I'm still wearing the uniform. I'm still standing in Hannah's backyard with my gun raised. Her eyes are still begging me to help her, and that long hand is still wrapped around her mouth. For 5 years, I believed I left the muffled curse in those woods. Tonight, I think I finally understand why Hannah sounded so empty when she spoke to the dispatcher. She wasn't telling them what she'd found. She was telling them what had found her. And now, whatever it is, knows where I live. Look, if you're still watching, you already know what this channel is. No jump scares, no fake drama, just real stories about real people who survive things most of us can't even imagine. And that's scarier than any movie could ever be. If you want more of this raw, unfiltered truth, told the way it deserves to be told, subscribe to Lacuna Noir. We're not here to waste your time. We're here to tell the stories that actually matter. Thanks for listening. Now go get some sleep, if you can.